understanding that the purpose of the money really should drive how the money is invested. And that's something that people don't necessarily appreciate enough because we see everybody else in the world getting rich.
Welcome to Get Unstuck and On Target, the weekly podcast that offers senior leaders insights and strategies to not only lead with confidence and vision, but also to achieve groundbreaking results. I'm your host, Mike O'Neill. I coach top-level executives on the power of ethical leadership to forge teams to be as united as they are effective. In each episode, join me for insightful conversations with leaders just like you, providing practical advice to help you get unstuck and propel you and your company forward. Let's get started. Joining me is Mike Wapner. Mike is a financial advisor with Blue Lake Wealth Advisor. He helps his clients achieve the most important goals in their life while also aligning their money with the issues that they're passionate about. For example, many people have environmental or social justice issues they care a great deal about. So Mike shows them how they can align their investments with their values as part of a comprehensive financial plan. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
I was interested in bringing you on the podcast for a couple of reasons. One, when I hear the term financial planning and when I talk to financial planners, it just seems to me that there is somewhat of a natural reluctance to go there by some people's part. So I'd love to be able to learn a little more about you and what got you into this and how you help your clients with that reluctance. But then I've been hearing a great deal about socially responsible investing and sustainability. And I kind of like to learn a little bit more about what that really looks like for an investor and how you kind of help investors align those things in a way that are kind of aligned with what is important to them. So let's start with how you got into what you do. What was the path that brought you to this?
Well, I've had a few careers in my life, and just a while back, when I was trying to decide what would be right at this point, my wife and I had actually been clients of a financial advisor for about 15 years at that time. And I realized we'd always felt very good about what they'd done for us. They really helped us understand where we were in our lives. They helped us look forward and see what is it that we want to achieve over the long term, and were we on the path to get there? And I realized that being able to do that kind of thing for other people would just be a really great thing to be able to do from a personal goals perspective, to be able to connect with people in that way, understand what's important to them, what they really are trying to do with their lives, what their priorities are, and help them get there.
Mike, you've been doing this for a while. I know you've had different careers that kind of led to this, and you've married that background in that process. Mike, what do you find oftentimes, what might be natural triggers that prompts someone to reach out and say, "How do you talk to Mike?"
Well, it's very, very situational when people are ready to talk to a financial advisor. And what I talk about is transitions. I mean, that's sort of a good way to summarize it. When somebody is either going through a transition in their life or really thinking about a major transition to come, they tend to have questions, and the kind of questions that somebody like me can help them with. So it starts on the simple end, such as, okay, I changed jobs. What should I do with my 401k? So that's kind of basic. Changing jobs, changing marital status, either in or out. There could be, a lot of kind of financial questions there. But starting to get a little more complicated. It's okay. My kids are going to be going off to school and college in some number of years. How should I best be planning for that and preparing for that financially? Or getting on the really big picture is, how do I know if I'm on track to have the kind of retirement that I want to have, the kind of long-term future that I envision for me and my family? So it's having these questions about, where they are and when they really are starting to look forward and say, okay, some things could be different there. Am I on that right path?
Yeah, I'm going to jump right in because you mentioned that what oftentimes is a trigger is some form of transition, if you would. I'm making an assumption, but it may be a wrong assumption, and that is that there may be some hesitancy to sit down and talk to somebody about this because it seems so serious. It seems so potentially complicated. One, do you see that that's common, that there's maybe initial reluctance? I don't use that word too lightly, but hesitancy to maybe have this conversation?
Yeah, it goes even farther back than that a little bit, because it's like people don't even realize maybe that they should be having this conversation. They have these questions in their minds, and they don't appreciate that this is something they can work with people on to help them get through these issues. And it really goes back to, most of us are brought up not talking about finance. I mean, in many families, it's the attitude of the parents that, kids don't need to know anything about, what money we have. They say, oh, mom, dad, how much money do you have? It's none of their business. And so there's not this history. There's not even a cultural thing of sharing thoughts about money. And when it comes to external people, yeah, I mean, think about some of your closest friends, some close family members. How many of them have you talked about your financial situation and your questions about whether you're going to have enough money for things? So it's just not something that we normally do. So to get people even to the point of saying, oh wow, maybe this is something that I can get some help with. Because I do realize I do have these questions, and what it usually comes to is when there's something more specific and technical, like what are the tax implications of something, or I like I said, I know I have to save for college, and what is the best program? So it's what gets through that initial reluctance, to use your word, but sort of just lack of motivation to discuss these things is usually a very specific question. And that's why, again, I talked about the transitions, because of those transitions, it's when a lot of these questions start really piling up.
You mentioned transitions oftentimes would trigger, but it goes back further. You mentioned that and this might vary by cultures, but there is a kind of a strong reluctance to talk about money and how money actually works. As you know, I spent a number of years in HR leadership roles, managing compensation plans. And those plans would pay some folks a lot of money. But the nature of the work that I did is I knew what everybody earned, but I had to keep that to myself.
Oh, yeah.
But I made an observation, and maybe this is perhaps bad science on my part, but I was surprised when I found that the extremely high earners oftentimes struggled with financial planning. They were making a lot of money, but they were spending a lot of money at the same time. And as I got to know particularly these folks, what I realized is that they grew accustomed to that high volume of income, but they also spent it. And it was not unusual that I would have a private conversation with a pretty high-ranking individual in the organization to find out they had not taken the steps that others in the organization, maybe much further down income-wise, had already taken. I think there's a misnomer also about financial planners. Some organizations, they kind of say, we're looking for a net worth of X. And some people think, well, I'm not there, therefore I can't even go there. Can you give us some guidance there? At what point does one need to begin thinking, I really need to reach out to a Mike and have this conversation? Do you need to be earning a lot of money to start that conversation?
No, because everybody has questions about things, and that's you kind of bring up a concern. Let's use that word that I have about my profession, because many people are very, very focused on the term is assets under management. And okay, it's their businesses and their business models and how they need to earn as well. But yeah, it's typical for financial advisors to say, well, if I can manage at least, a common number is $500,000 of your money, we can do some planning too. But yeah, Mike, like you said, there are people who might not have that amount of money yet, or there are actually plenty of people happy managing their investments these days. It's become, for people who are interested, very doable, but they still have questions about things. And no, it does not require any certain level of income or assets. I work with young people that are, I mean, not necessarily straight out of college kind of thing, but people who've been out in the working world for 5-10 years, and really want to look forward and say, okay, am I saving enough money? Am I investing it properly? Am I taking advantage of different opportunities that I might have, given the kind of goals that I have longer term? And there's most of the people in that kind of position, haven't yet accumulated $500,000. So yeah, it's very much there are questions that people have, and when they realize that finance can get complicated, and they're willing to get a little bit into that complexity with somebody's help, those are good times to talk to a financial advisor. There are other advisors like me who will focus on planning and will do planning independent of investment management. I'm happy to do either or both, and or. But yeah, there are others that do this as well, and each have different cost structures, fee structures. Some will do it on an hourly basis. So yeah, there's ways for people with questions to get engaged with somebody who talks about these things for a living.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We had this conversation in our first one-on-one. We met via LinkedIn. I got to know you, and that's why I concluded you'd be a great podcast guest, because you differentiated the financial planning from investment management. They oftentimes are linked together, and what you're saying is you can decouple that and do decouple that, whereas you could provide assistance in developing a financial plan separate from what will this money, how that be invested and the like. Can you just kind of walk us through, when you're working with a client on kind of developing a financial plan, what are those major things that kind of need to be addressed when one is building a financial plan?
Well, the first conversation I have with people before we even agree to work together, I ask them a lot of questions about their concerns and their goals. What are those what are those things in the big picture that they're really looking forward and really want to achieve? Does somebody want to start a business? Is there somebody in the family that maybe has special needs that they have to take care of? I mean, it could be so many different things, but we learned about all these goals and goals and concerns. And when we actually get started with a planning engagement, that's done in the context of those goals. I mean, from a quantitative mechanical perspective, we start out with, okay, what's today's income, expenses, assets, liability? And then we project things forward. Okay, how do you see your income changing over time? And then we start throwing in those goals or those concerns with, all right, would you like to, are you interested in that vacation home? And, well, let's see if there's room in the plan for that based on your other assumptions about income, expenses. I'm working with a couple who's one of the spouse's mothers is probably going to need some financial assistance, in her later years. So we say, all right, let's include that there and see how things work through so that we get a feel for long-term. Are you in good shape? Do the assets build and grow, and are they there to satisfy those needs that we've identified over time?
Mike, I was very fortunate when I entered the corporate world, and I was given opportunities, and I stayed with the same company, but the company kept growing. So I didn't have to leave the company to pursue bigger opportunities. That happened for me over a period for a long. And so I could almost project progressions as I took on more and more responsibilities. But I probably am more of the exception. In today's economy, I know people change not only jobs at a more frequent basis, but they change careers. How do they go about trying to project something when they don't even know where they're going to be working a year or two from now?
Yeah, that it's a difficult thing, but those are the conversations we have around. Well, if you want to do whatever in the longer term, if you want to have that available to you, yeah, you're thinking about changing jobs, changing careers next year. Well, tell me, how much money do you think you can make doing it? And we'll see. Does that then lead to the achievement of those goals? If those assumptions that they have, oh, well, I think I can do this and this, if those assumptions still don't add up, well, we know right there that there's a problem. If somebody really doesn't know, well, we take our best guess at the time. But the thing is, financial planning is not necessarily just a plan that we work on and then we put over on a shelf and that's it. And the ongoing relationship can be in a few ways. At a minimum, what you want to do is a couple of years later, go back and revisit that plan, so that if you have made that career change, say 2 years later, and you're a year or two into it, you can see, well, were my projections, my expectations, my hopes, or the kind of income that would provide, are they living up to what we said in the plan would be required to achieve the long term? If yes, well, great. If not, okay, well, let's really look at that plan and say, all right, is this the way you want to continue? Because then we have to change things longer term, or so you change the present to really help ensure the longer term, or do you change the longer term expectations? So that's the thing. So planning is really a process. What we can do today will certainly help reduce the uncertainty. Because we can't eliminate uncertainty, but we want to be able to reduce the uncertainty, put some bounds on it. But like with anything else, as you go forward, more things change, and as major things change, including something like changing a career, you really want to revisit your status and revisit those assumptions.
I kind of set up this conversation as bookends. We're going to talk not only about why financial planning is important, but also how that money is actually invested. And I may not be using the right terminology of sustainable and socially responsible investing, but the concept I think I get. But for our viewers, for our listeners, can you kind of define what that actually means?
I will try. One of the challenges is that the terminology is a bit of a mess. Mm-hmm. There are no official definitions for any of the couple of dozen different words and terms and acronyms that are used out there, which causes problems because you get people using the same terms to mean different things, and obviously from a communication standpoint, that's terrible. But what I generally try to focus on, because I'm coming from the consumer side, mm-hmm. I'm coming from the investor perspective. And what I want to be able to do is help an investor who's interested align their money with their values. Okay. So, the priority being, something they care about. How can they invest to connect with those issues that they care about, either in a positive or a negative way? And there are actually different strategies for doing that kind of thing, different investment strategies, and which is another one of the difficulties in the field, because a lot of people might believe there's a single sustainable investing strategy or socially responsible investing strategy, but there's really not, because like most things in life, they're trade-offs, and it depends on priorities and what different people prioritize. And based on those priorities, you can have different ways of then connecting to the investments, some of the strategies could be in direct conflict with each other. And so just like, again, if people don't realize that they could be looking at different things and think it's one thing, that's where we get a lot of people saying, this doesn't make sense. This is garbage. This is crap. This is greenwashing. Just because it's not internally consistent. But again, without having a better understanding of what is really going on, what the options are, it's going to be difficult to see that. And I'm aware of that. I know this field is still under development. It's it's imperfect. There are trade-offs, but there is so much more information and so many more investment options available now, than even 10 years ago. That just because it's not perfect doesn't mean that we can't get engaged with it.
Mike, you mentioned there's so much information available now that I would contend it can almost be overwhelming of all your choices. Is that part of what you do for your clients? You try to help them experience a less overwhelm and just kind of, to the best of your ability, kind of lay out their options and then they choose what seems to align best with them?
Yeah, at a high level, yes. I mean, yes, some people might come in overwhelmed, but it's really more common people come in not knowing how to start because they have that interest, or they've heard, oh, well, I can sort of guide my investments somehow, but they don't know what that means. They don't know how to start. So that's really more common. And for those people, it's, well, let me understand what are the values, what are your priorities, and then I will offer different kinds of investment vehicles that I believe line up with that. I am first and foremost a financial advisor, and I believe in a well-diversified portfolio. And any of the sustainable and socially responsible, environmentally friendly, and whatever terms, any of the investing I do fits into that portfolio. But like I said, there's a lot more available now. It is now possible. There are so many options for being able to do those things within a large company U.S. category, or within a international developed markets category, or within a bonds fixed income category. And so as I learn people's priorities and say, hey, how about this type of investment? We can use this as part of part of that segment of your allocation, and and not just have a, say, generic S&P 500 fund. We can adjust that in different ways. And for the people who are coming in overwhelmed, it's really the same thing. They have maybe started seeing that there's all these different things going on, and they don't have enough knowledge to be able to contextualize them and see where they fit into a larger plan. And so providing that context, I think, helps there too, because, okay, that's where these kind of things fit in. I can now evaluate which of those matches better.
You used the term greenwashing a few minutes ago, and I'm not sure I know what that means its entirety. But before I go there, let me ask the question. When I go to a company's website and I try to read about the things that are important to them, I inevitably get to some section where you see and read language about some of the things we're kind of talking about.
Yep.
And
over 95% of S&P 500 produces an annual sustainability report. So you've seen some of those.
So I've seen them, but I don't know if I'm convinced that what I'm reading is in actuality. How do you help folks like me who's maybe a little bit skeptical of what you read?
Mm-hmm. Well, I fortunately, there are a lot of other people reading this stuff and evaluating it. And so what I do is rely to a certain extent on some of these organizations that are doing, what I loosely say is rating and ranking, where they will look at company by company and see what they are saying and how they are performing along, a broad number of factors. We can't have this conversation without me throwing in the term ESG, the acronym, which stands for environmental, social, and governance.
Yes.
I don't use that because that is probably the most overused, undefined term, in this part of the finance industry, and unfortunately has become very politically charged. But the thing is, there are a number of factors that would fit under the E or under the S or under the G that these organizations are looking at and seeing how company by company, these companies are doing it, under these various factors, coming up with ratings and then ranking them in different ways. Now, the good thing is that there's a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. I just use the term organizations to separate from companies, which are the companies being evaluated. So a lot of organizations doing this kind of thing. So that's good. The tougher thing is that each one of them has what they believe is the best methodology and the best information sources, which means that they can be very different from each other. Which is one reason why people say, "Oh, this is crap," because there's you could take two different organizations' ratings of the same company; they could be different. And like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? But this is where I get back to the old cliche: "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." Okay, understand that these different organizations are looking at companies, but understand also what these organizations are prioritizing. One thing, where are they getting their information? Because they're not just reading reports. A lot of them say, we interview people in the company and also interview, customers and suppliers and competitors to really understand not just what they're saying, but what they're actually doing. And different organizations are doing this in different ways, focusing on different factors. And this is what I try to bring, which is not just looking at what the companies are saying, but trying to bring in what the rest of the financial ecosystem in this case is saying about that company. And this is also where it gets back to priorities. There's, as for example, an organization that is focused on carbon and because of climate change. And they just evaluate companies on kind of their carbon footprint. For some things, that's going to be important, but there's dozens of other things that you could look at environmentally, socially, or under the governance umbrella that also could be important to some people. And that pure carbon rating, they actually even give them letter grades, might not be enough. Mm-hmm. So again, it's understanding where the different information is coming from, how it's being presented, and then again, lining it up with what somebody cares about.
We thus far have kind of touched on why financial planning is important. We've kind of touched on the myriad of choices that people have if they really want to invest in a way that are aligned with some values that may vary widely. Mike, as you kind of reflect on your career in this industry, what do you find that most people just kind of get wrong when it comes to this idea of financial planning and or investing?
Well, on the investment side, the difficulty is people connecting their investments to their goals. Mm. Some people might start out saying, "Well, I want to do the best I can, and here, manage my money, get me the best return you can." Well, the reason I start out with the planning is because I need to know the purpose of the money before I know how to invest the money. Mm. And if, just a huge, easy example is it retirement money or 30, 40 years from now? Or is it, I have to make the down payment on my condo next year with this money? So it's pretty clear you're going to want to do different investments there. And there's a lot of things in between. And, so understanding the purpose of the money really should drive how the money is invested. And that's something that people don't necessarily appreciate enough because, we see everybody else in the world getting rich and, investing in Bitcoin and, how can I get rich too? Sorry, I have to throw out this anecdote. My older daughter was in college at this point, and I got a text from her one morning. This was right when there was this big blow up about these companies, everybody bidding on these companies, and what was GameStop. I was on, mm-hmm. And her comment was, "Why can't I get rich like everyone else on the internet?" Mm. So it's a disconnect between what investing for the long term connected to what you're trying to do in the long term and what you see externally about how do I hit big on some investment, or what's the best thing for me to do here, or should I be in this fund or that fund or this company or that company? For me, somebody who really wants to emphasize the planning, investments need to be tied to, if not necessarily a whole plan, but certainly to, what's going on in life, what might try to do there. On the investment side, that's on the planning side, it's really just people. I said before, people's lives are complicated, finances get complicated, and some people, I've had people say this to me: if I think about it too much, it stresses me out, so I just don't think about it. Mm. Now, for some people, that is a personal financial strategy. I don't happen to believe it's the best one. And so, what I encourage people is that I'm very much a knowledge is power kind of guy, and say, if we look at this stuff, first of all, we can get rid of some of that complexity. We can help you understand, what is really going on, what kind of options you have, and the implications of those. And in some cases, maybe the truth might hurt a little bit, or it might be a little disappointing as opposed to the fantasy you could have if you didn't know the truth. But ultimately, I certainly believe ultimately you're better off with that understanding, because then you can be in control, as opposed to just feeling like you're at the whims of the economy and the financial markets are going to batter you around. No, there are ways you can have control over what you're doing, and that's what planning really enables.
It's very clear. Not only do you know what you're talking about, you have a real heart for what is it that we're describing. That comes through loud and clear. If folks want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you, Mike?
Well, number one is email. And my email address is first initial last name. So that's MWA, P as in Peter, N as in Nancy, ER, at bluelakewealth.com. That's blue the color, lake the body of water, and wealth the money. So Wapner at bluelakewealth.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Mike Wapner is there. And couple different ways. Those are the best ways to reach me.
Well, it's on LinkedIn that you and I first connected. I anticipated you would be able to offer insights that would be enlightening. You have. Thank you for sharing those insights with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. I hope it's been helpful to some people.
I've got a question for our listeners. Are people following you because they have to or because they want to? As a leadership coach, I work with executives who have a track record of success behind them, but they're now feeling stuck. They're frustrated because they're finding that with each level of success that follows, that bar, it's set even higher. They're discouraged because what worked in the past, it's no longer even working. So my clients, despite all of those successes in the past, they're lacking the clarity and the confidence to make the decisions needed to get to that next level. So if feeling stuck describes you or someone you know, let's talk. Head over to bench-builders.com to schedule a call. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have picked up on some quick wins from Mike that will help you get unstuck and on target. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Get Unstuck and On Target. I hope you've gained insights to help you lead with confidence and drive your organization forward. Remember, at Bench Builders, we're committed to your success, your leadership excellence, and your strategic growth. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, please leave a review, rate, and subscribe to keep up with our latest episodes. This show really grows when listeners like you share it with others. Who do you know who needs to hear what we talked about today? Until next time, I encourage you to stay focused on the target and continue to break new ground on your leadership path.